Welcome back to Iraqi Dinar Updates, your trusted channel where we explore what's really going on behind the headline especially when it comes to global currencies, shifting economies, and how these events could directly impact the Iraqi dinar and your financial future. Today's topic is a big one. In fact, it might just be the biggest economic shift we've ever seen in modern history. I know that sounds dramatic, but stay with me. Across the globe, from Washington to Beijing, from Moscow to Iran, powerful moves are being made. Financial, political, and strategic. Central banks are shifting their reserves. Oil is being traded in different currencies. Nations are rethinking their alliances. And you? You need to understand what's happening behind the scenes. This isn't about fear. This is about knowledge, preparation, and timing. So buckle up, because what we're about to dive into could change everything you thought you knew about the global financial system and the role of the Iraqi dinar in it. Main script: approximately 2,700 words. Let's begin by taking a look at the world stage as it stands right now. Think of a chessboard. Every country is a piece. And right now, the major players are repositioning themselves for a new kind of game, and not one fought with weapons, but with interest rates, oil contracts, digital currencies, and alliances. Let's start with China. Over the past decade, China has made one thing very clear: it wants to challenge the global dominance of the US dollar. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's fact. China has been promoting its currency, the yuan, as an alternative in global trade. It's been buying up gold at record levels, entering bilateral agreements with countries to settle trade in local currencies, and pushing the creation of the so-called BRICS currency, an idea supported by nations like Russia, Brazil, and India. Why does this matter? Because the US dollar has been the world's reserve currency for decades. That means countries all over the world hold dollars in their reserves and use them for global trade, especially when it comes to oil. But what happens if more and more countries decide they no longer want to use the dollar? That brings us to Saudi Arabia. Recently, for the first time in decades, Saudi Arabia has shown signs that it might be willing to sell oil in other currencies and not just the US dollar. This is huge. For years, the US dollar's dominance has been tied directly to oil, the so-called petrodollar system. If Saudi Arabia breaks from that, other oil producers might follow. And if that happens, demand for the dollar could fall dramatically. Now enter Russia. After the Ukraine conflict and the massive sanctions that followed, Russia was largely cut off from the Western banking system. What did they do? They began selling oil and gas to China and India in rubles and yuan. This sent a clear message: the world no longer needs to rely on the dollar for energy. And let's not forget Iran. For years, Iran has been a test case for life under US sanctions. But Iran didn't crumble. Instead, it built stronger ties with China and Russia, forming what some analysts call a parallel global economy, one where trade continues, but without the dollar. Then there's the role of central banks. In 2022 and 2023, central banks around the world bought more gold than in any other time in recent history. Why? Because gold is seen as a hedge against currency devaluation. And if they're preparing for a major shift away from the dollar, they'll want the safest assets they can get. What does this have to do with the Iraqi dinar? Everything. Let me explain. Iraq has long been stuck in a strange economic situation. It's a country rich in oil and natural resources, but hampered by sanctions, instability, and currency controls. The dinar remains undervalued on the global stage, largely due to its restricted exchange system and its reliance on US dollar auctions to stabilize its economy. But what happens if the global system starts moving away from the dollar? If oil starts being sold in other currencies such as yuan, rubles, or a new BRICS-backed digital asset, then countries like Iraq could gain more flexibility. They may be able to trade more freely, without being stuck in a dollar-based system. This could eventually allow for a reevaluation or revaluation of the Iraqi dinar. But here's the kicker: timing is everything. I'm not saying a dinar revaluation will happen tomorrow. And I'm definitely not saying this is guaranteed. But what I am saying is that the global economic environment is changing rapidly and Iraq will be forced to adapt. Whether that means closer ties to China, new oil contracts in non-dollar currencies, or reforms in the central banking system, these things are already on the table. Let's shift our attention back to the US for a moment. The Federal Reserve has been raising interest rates to fight inflation. At the same time, US debt is exploding. The more interest they have to pay on that debt, the harder it becomes to sustain the current system. Some economists warn that this is unsustainable, and that a debt crisis could trigger a global financial reset. And in a global reset, currencies like the Iraqi dinar or currencies tied to real assets like oil could gain new value. Now, I want to be very clear here. This is not financial advice. I am not telling you to go out and buy millions of dinar. But I am telling you this: don't ignore the signs. Don't assume that the world will stay the same just because it always has. We are living through the biggest shift in economic power we've seen in decades or possibly in centuries. Governments are preparing. Central banks are preparing. Are you? One of the things I get asked a lot is, why would the global powers allow this to happen? Why would the US just sit back and watch its dominance disappear? The truth is, they're not. The US is fighting hard to keep the dollar on top. That's why sanctions are used so aggressively. That's why you see US influence in IMF decisions, in SWIFT system access, and in military alliances. But here's the thing: control is slipping. The more the US tries to isolate countries like Russia, Iran, or even China, the more those countries unite and create their own systems. Systems that don't rely on the dollar. And once a tipping point is reached, once enough countries feel confident in using alternative systems, the US may no longer have the leverage it once did. And then the whole game changes. Let's go back to our earlier metaphor of the chessboard. Right now, the pieces are moving fast. China is buying gold and offering loans in yuan. Russia is trading outside the dollar system. BRICS nations are meeting to discuss a new reserve currency. Iran is building rail and trade networks with Eurasian allies. And Iraq? Iraq is at a crossroads. It can continue to tie itself to a system that may be weakening, or it can prepare for a new phase. A new economy. A new valuation. The good news? Iraq has the resources. It has oil, natural gas, agriculture, and a young population. If the right reforms are put in place, if corruption is reduced, if the central bank modernizes, and if trade is opened up, Iraq could be a major player in the new economy. But this won't happen overnight. And it won't happen without awareness. That's why you're here. That's why this channel exists. To keep you informed. To connect the dots. To share insights that the mainstream media won't touch. Because let's face it, they want you to be reactive. We want you to be prepared. So what can you do? Stay educated. Read beyond the headlines. Ask questions. Watch how central banks move, not what they say, but what they do. Keep an eye on Iraq's monetary policies and economic reforms. Understand that the dollar system isn't invincible. And most importantly, don't fall into panic or hype. Stay grounded, but alert. We're in a new era. Digital currencies are coming. Alliances are shifting. And fiat money, or the paper in your pocket, is losing trust by the day. In a world where inflation, war, and uncertainty are the norm, knowledge is your best defense. This isn't just a financial shift. It's a power shift. A control shift. A narrative shift. And those who understand it now will be far ahead of those who don't. So now you know the biggest economic shift we've ever experienced isn't coming. It's already happening. And whether you hold US dollars, Iraqi dinar, or any other currency, you need to understand that the ground beneath your feet is moving fast. If you found value in today's video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We've got a lot more deep dives coming your way, especially on the Iraqi dinar and the role it may play in the years ahead. This has been Iraqi Dinar Updates. Stay sharp, stay informed, and as always keep your eyes open and your mind even more so. Thanks for watching. Until next time.